All right, so today we're diving deep into the world of Peter Thiel. He's this fascinating figure who's been called both, a visionary and a villain. And we're going to try to figure out why people say that by looking at a biography about him.
Yeah, what I find really interesting about Thiel is that he really embodies what it means to be a contrarian thinker. He doesn't just follow the crowd, he challenges the norm. And that approach has really led to some remarkable achievements.
So is being a contrarian like just disagreeing with everybody all the time?
It's deeper than that. I think Thiel's contrarian thinking is more about really identifying widely held beliefs and then questioning their validity, like asking, what if everyone's wrong, and then building his career on that principle.
Okay, so let's rewind a bit and go back to his roots. Thiel's childhood in apartheid South Africa, I imagine that had to have some influence on his worldview.
Oh, absolutely. Growing up in such a complex system, even though morally reprehensible, it provided him with a really unique perspective. He saw how a system could function despite ethical flaws, which I think, gave him that early understanding of pragmatic and outcome-focused thinking.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes you think about how our early environments shape our thinking, even if we end up rejecting the specific values of those environments.
Yeah, exactly. It's like those early experiences create a foundation for how we view the world later on.
So then he goes to Stanford and continues to kind of embrace this outsider role.
Yeah, I mean, at Stanford, he really solidified those contrarian tendencies. He was actively seeking out perspectives that challenged the mainstream. Like that story about him and his friends getting pulled over for speeding.
Oh, yeah, where he launches into a debate with the officer about the constitutionality of speed limits.
Yeah, and then after the officer lets them off with a warning, what does he do? He speeds off.
Classic. It perfectly shows his, disregard for conventional rules and his belief in challenging the status quo.
Totally. It wasn't about being reckless. It was about questioning authority.
So then he goes to law school, aiming for a Supreme Court clerkship. But when that doesn't work out, he pivots to finance and then eventually Silicon Valley.
Right. And instead of seeing that as a failure, he saw it as an opportunity to reshape the systems that had rejected him.
Right. It's that whole take this system down from the inside type of thing.
Exactly. And I think that unwavering determination is really a big part of what's driven him to achieve what many thought was impossible.
It's like those setbacks fueled his ambition.
Mm-hmm.
And, it makes you think, how often do we let perceived failures derail our paths when they could actually be redirecting us to something much more impactful?
That's a great point. It's definitely something we can all learn from Thiel's journey. He took those early struggles, like the challenges he faced with his hedge fund Galarium Capital during the dot-com bust, and he used them as fuel to propel him forward.
And that's where his contrarian thinking really shines. I mean, while everyone else was running from tech during the dot-com bust, he doubled down and started investing in it.
Yeah, he wasn't afraid to go against the crowd. He saw the potential of technology when others just saw risk. He wasn't blinded by fear or swayed by, what everyone else was doing. He followed his own logic, and it paid off.
And then, of course, there's PayPal, this brainchild of his, along with Max Levchin, which became a major success story. And it also gave birth to the PayPal Mafia, this group of incredibly talented individuals who went on to make their own mark on the tech world.
Yeah, PayPal really embodies a key element of Thiel's philosophy, which is, blitz scaling. It's not just about growing a company. It's about dominating the market at lightning speed.
Okay, so blitz scaling. But isn't that kind of aggressive? Where do you draw the ethical lines with something like that?
Well, blitz scaling is about making bold moves and taking calculated risks. Prioritize speed and growth over perfection, which often disrupts existing norms. I think PayPal's willingness to push boundaries, like exploiting loopholes in banking regulations, is a good example of that approach.
So it's not necessarily about throwing ethics out the window, but more about challenging conventional ways of doing things in order to achieve rapid growth.
Exactly. It's about, identifying and capitalizing on opportunities that others might miss because they're too hesitant to challenge the status quo. It's a high-stakes game that requires a certain level of fearlessness and vision.
And that boldness certainly paid off with PayPal. And it set the stage for Thiel's future ventures. But what's interesting is he didn't stop there. He continued to invest in companies that kind of defied conventional wisdom.
That's right. He saw the potential of Facebook, connecting people on a scale never seen before.
Right.
But then he also invested in Palantir, this company that developed data mining technologies, which raised some eyebrows about, privacy and government surveillance.
It's an interesting contrast, isn't it? Facebook and Palantir. It's like he saw the potential of technology to both connect and control, kind of two sides of the same coin.
Right. It shows that duality of technology's impact and, Thiel's willingness to explore both the positive and potentially negative aspects. He wasn't afraid to delve into areas that others might consider controversial, always seeking to push those boundaries of what's possible.
And then there are his ventures into like seasteading and life extension. These aren't just investments. They're more like reflections of his desire to create a future that's drastically different from the present.
Yeah, those ventures really showcase his long-term thinking and ambition to tackle those big challenges. He isn't content with just incremental improvements. He wants to solve seemingly impossible problems. That's something I think is really important for our listeners to understand.
It's like he's looking at the world saying, we don't have to accept the limitations we've been given. We can create something totally new. And that kind of brings us to his entry into politics.
Yeah, his involvement in politics, starting with his support for Ron Paul and then culminating in his backing of Donald Trump, really reveals his belief in the power of technology to shape political outcomes.
And let's not forget his role in the Hulk Hogan lawsuit against Gawker, which he secretly funded. It definitely raises questions about the use of power and where the line is between seeking justice and trying to silence critics.
Absolutely. It's a complex situation that shows how personal beliefs can influence actions, and, it makes us think about how we navigate the ethical complexities of power and influence, especially in this digital age where technology can be used to amplify both.
Yeah, it was a story that sparked a ton of debate and continues to make people think about free speech, the role of the media, and the potential for individuals to wield immense power in this digital age.
It's a good reminder that technology isn't neutral. It's a tool that can be used for good or for bad, and it's up to us to ensure it's used ethically and responsibly.
That's a really crucial point to consider moving forward. And Thiel's story definitely shows us we need to be actively shaping the future instead of just passively accepting whatever comes our way.
Yeah, that's what sets Thiel apart. He's not just watching the changes happening around him. He's actively trying to shape those changes. And that's a powerful lesson for all of us. That lawsuit against Gawker really highlighted the potential consequences when someone has a lot of power, especially when they have strong beliefs and the resources to act on them.
It definitely makes you think about, even in a society that values free speech and freedom of the press, there is still these vulnerabilities that can be exploited.
For sure. It also raises those questions about, ethics when it comes to technology and influence, especially in this digital world where the lines between personal and public can get pretty blurry.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about another interesting aspect of Thiel's approach, the Thiel Fellowship. This program encourages young people to kind of step outside that traditional education system and just go for their entrepreneurial dreams.
Right. It's a prime example of Thiel challenging the status quo. He really questioned the value of a traditional college education, especially for those who are driven to create and innovate.
And it was a pretty bold move, considering how ingrained the idea of college being the path to success is. So what do you think was the driving force behind this initiative?
Well, I think it goes back to his own experiences, and his belief that conventional paths aren't always the best for everyone. It was partly a reaction to how he was portrayed in that movie, The Social Network, about Facebook. He saw it as a chance to shape his own narrative and support a new generation of thinkers who shared his, entrepreneurial spirit.
So it wasn't just about the money. He wanted to create a community of like-minded people who weren't afraid to challenge those norms and go their own way.
Yeah, exactly. He believed that exceptional talent could thrive outside of those traditional institutions. He wanted to empower young people to take risks, experiment, and learn by actually doing it instead of being stuck in the structure of academia.
It's definitely an interesting approach, especially with the rising cost of college and the changing job market these days.
It definitely makes you think about the role of education and, what skills people actually need to succeed in this crazy 21st century world.
And, the Thiel Fellowship really shows his commitment to supporting that new generation of entrepreneurs, the ones who aren't afraid to disrupt and push those boundaries.
Absolutely. And speaking of pushing boundaries, we can't forget about Thiel's feud with Google. He's been pretty vocal about his criticisms of the tech giant.
Yeah, calling Google treasonous for their ties to the Chinese military is a pretty serious accusation. So what were his main concerns there?
Well, he argued that Google's involvement in projects that had potential military applications, particularly in China, raised concerns about sensitive technology being shared and potentially, weakening America's dominance in the tech world.
So he saw it as a betrayal of American values
Yeah.
and a threat to national security, especially with all the global competition happening these days.
Right. It really sparked a debate about the role of tech companies in national security and the whole ethics of technological advancements that could be used for military purposes. It's complicated with no easy answers, but it brought to light this increasing connection between technology politics and national security.
Yeah, it's definitely a reminder that technology isn't just this neutral thing. It can have some really big implications. And it seems like Thiel's not afraid to make his opinions known, even if they're controversial.
Exactly. That's classic Thiel, challenging the status quo and sparking debate even on sensitive issues.
Okay, so let's dive into another area where Thiel has made his mark, politics. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think his involvement in politics, starting with his support for Ron Paul and then eventually backing Donald Trump, shows that he believes technology can disrupt traditional political systems and influence the outcome.
So it wasn't just about aligning with a specific party. He wanted to use his influence to actually reshape the political landscape.
Yeah, he saw it as an opportunity to shake things up, kind of like he did in the tech world. Bring about change through unconventional means.
And his support for Trump, someone who challenged the establishment and resonated with people who felt disillusioned with the status quo, makes sense considering Thiel's own contrarian instincts.
Definitely. It was a move that caught a lot of people off guard, but it showed he was willing to support those who challenged the norm, even if it meant facing criticism.
But it wasn't just about endorsing a candidate. He was actively involved in the campaign as an advisor and even spoke at the Republican National Convention.
Right. He wanted to influence policy, especially when it came to technology and innovation. He believes that the government can play a role in encouraging technological advancement and ensuring America stays ahead in the global tech race.
It's interesting how those who shape the tech world often have a big impact on politics, too. Their ideas, their resources, their influence can shape policies, regulations, even entire industries.
It really highlights how interconnected technology, politics, and society are. Decisions made in one area can have ripple effects across the board.
Now let's get back to Thiel's entrepreneurial ventures and talk about those futuristic concepts that have captured his interest.
Right? Things like seasteading, creating those permanent living spaces out at sea, and life extension technologies. It shows he's willing to explore unconventional solutions to problems that seem impossible to solve.
It's like he sees those limitations not as boundaries, but as challenges to overcome.
Yeah.
He's driven to explore new frontiers, both literally and metaphorically.
Totally. I mean, take seasteading, for example. It's an attempt to create societies that are free from traditional governments and regulations, which aligns with his libertarian views and his belief that technology can open up new possibilities.
It's definitely a radical vision, but it shows his willingness to challenge conventional thinking and explore alternative ways to organize society.
He believes technology can empower individuals to create their own destinies, free from the limitations of existing systems.
And then there's life extension, something that might seem like science fiction to some.
Right. But Thiel doesn't see aging as an inevitable part of life. He sees it as a problem to be solved. He thinks technology can extend human lifespans, giving people more time to pursue their goals, contribute to society.
It's a stance that raises a lot of ethical and philosophical questions about life, death, and messing with the natural order of things.
But that's what makes him so interesting. He's willing to challenge deeply held beliefs and confront those big questions. He's not afraid to go against the grain, even when it comes to something as fundamental as human mortality.
These ventures might seem outlandish to some, but they show his dedication to pushing the limits of what's possible and his belief that technology can change our understanding of human potential and how societies are structured.
Absolutely. It's that blend of intellectual curiosity, entrepreneurial spirit, and that willingness to challenge the norm that makes Peter Thiel such a captivating figure to study. He's always pushing the envelope, making us question our assumptions and consider new ways forward.
It's a good reminder that progress often comes from those who dare to think differently, challenge the status quo, and find those unconventional solutions. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into the world of Peter Thiel, from his childhood in South Africa to his big moves in Silicon Valley and even his involvement in politics.
It's been quite a journey exploring the mind of a truly unconventional thinker, someone who's always challenging norms and pushing those boundaries.
So as we wrap things up here, what are some of the key takeaways our listeners can learn from Thiel's story?
I think one of the most important things is the power of contrarian thinking. Thiel built his success by questioning conventional wisdom and finding opportunities where others saw nothing but risk.
But it's not just about disagreeing to be different, right?
Yeah.
It's about having that courage to look at things from a different angle and ask, what if everyone else is wrong?
Exactly. It's about challenging those assumptions, identifying those blind spots, and being willing to explore the unknown. Thiel's story is a good reminder that innovation often comes from those who aren't afraid to think differently.
And another thing that stands out is the importance of building strong networks and surrounding yourself with talented individuals who share your vision.
Yeah, Thiel's success is partly because of his ability to build those relationships with brilliant and loyal people, like that PayPal mafia. Those connections gave him access to capital, talent, and ideas, which really amplified his impact.
He gets it. You can't achieve great things alone. It's about collaboration, bringing together different perspectives and building a team that can help you execute your vision.
Absolutely. And we also can't forget about his influence on the tech industry. His philosophy of blitz scaling, prioritizing rapid growth and dominating the market, has become a core part of Silicon Valley's startup culture.
Like companies like Uber, Airbnb, SpaceX. They've all embraced that approach and achieved phenomenal growth in a short amount of time.
Blitz scaling is a risky strategy for sure, but it's definitely changed the way companies think about growth and innovation.
Thiel's story also highlights that connection between technology, politics, and society, His involvement in politics, his support for controversial figures, and his criticism of Google show that tech leaders have a lot of influence that extends beyond just business.
Yeah, their decisions and actions can shape policies, regulations, even entire industries. It's a reminder that technology isn't neutral. It's a powerful tool that can be used to push different agendas and shape the world around us.
So as we close out this deep dive, what's the lasting impression Peter Thiel leaves on us?
Peter Thiel is a complex and controversial figure, but there's no denying the impact he's had. He's a brilliant entrepreneur, a visionary investor, and a thought leader who's challenged conventional thinking and pushed the boundaries of what's possible.
Whether you agree with him or not, his story shows us that progress often comes from those who dare to think differently, question the status quo, and take those unconventional paths. He kind of encourages us to embrace our own inner contrarian and challenge those assumptions and never stop exploring.
It's an invitation to think critically, embrace risk, and believe in the power of ideas to shape the future.
That's a great message to remember as we navigate this crazy 21st century world. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Peter Thiel. We hope you found it insightful and maybe sparked some new thoughts.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep pushing those boundaries of what's possible.